a government leaves, a new government comes in, and there is even no continuity. You know, because it would have been sweeter if, okay, after expending so much, the next man can carry on from there. But the next man wants to dismantle everything he met and then wants to start his own. He's going to sack all the advisors, sack everyone in the parastatals, and then it begins again. All the old vehicles, some of them will naturally disappear, then you have to get new vehicles. And nobody wants to ride anything small. Everybody wants, you know, all the big cars. It's just a shame. The way I put it is that it seems we don't like our country. Because if you love your country, then you wish your country well. We've been complaining forever. I read Achebe's book, and I remember that in that book, there was a passage where it was saying, where does one begin? You know? So do we need dictators? We fought dictators, they left. Because unlike in a place like Ghana, where you had a dictator with a vision who had a clear idea of what he wanted to achieve, and he took his time and he did it. But in our own case, as soon as the military came, they also became politicians. And that is what has led us to where we are now.
A country like ours, about 160 million Nigerians, and we are in this financial, economic mess. One would think that there should be a rallying point. You were going to be a president if you were elected. You ran for president. If you got that opportunity to become a president and you are in this particular situation, what would you do?
Well, the first thing is that a president must be able to bring everybody together, whether on the right or on the left. And that is why each time I see the way our leaders are fighting over virtually everything, I feel very sad. Because the executive cannot do it alone, the legislature cannot do it alone. So if the executive and the legislature can come together, then maybe, especially now that we have a strong leader in President Buhari, and it seems we have a very strong leadership in the National Assembly, and they are in the same party. So if they can all come together, then maybe they can fashion out a way forward. But by the time you're all busy fighting, people are already thinking about 2019. Look, we have not even finished the problems at hand. Some people are already talking about 2019. Then it's not going to be funny. It's just going to be this, just going round and round and round until God knows what will happen.
Let's quickly go to our Abuja studio where Mr. Nwankwo is. You're a lawyer, and of course, a lot of these issues now lie on the constitutionality of some of his suggestions made in the national and at the national conference. Of course, we heard what Chief Momodu has said. It's an urgent matter, one that demands immediate action by Nigerian leaders. Legally speaking, what would you suggest that must be done immediately in the light of what the Emir of Kano said?
Well, I think that given, it wouldn't be the first time that anybody has said this, and I think it's important that the Emir is saying it. And I think that being said at that level also means that at the government level, this should really be taken seriously, because it means that a lot more Nigerians are saying the same issues, that we want to see less resources used for servicing officials in government and more used in development. I think that the government needs to look at the crisis that we face with, and that's part of the problem with the executive, that it doesn't come up with a legislative agenda for itself. And if a government at the executive level decides that it wants to legislatively restructure the country, then he has to, or the president has to get proper advice from the Attorney General on how to go about this. And part of the issue, like we have rightly identified here, is the over-bloated nature of government. How can you cut back on this? Reducing the states, should we fundamentally restructure the country so that you have less states, less structures of government? I would advocate that, quite frankly, as well, like the Mayor has done. And it was our former Vice President, Alex Ekweme, who together with some other of his colleagues, came up with the structure of what is described today as the geopolitical zones. I don't see why that cannot be a beginning. I listened to Dele Momodu talking about going back to the regional systems of government, which is about 4, the north, the east, the west, and the Midwest. I think that if you were to go back to the 6 geopolitical zone initiative, I think that you can then structure the country along those lines. You would reduce the totality of officials at the different levels, have one unicameral legislature at the national level, and then begin to take the budget process very seriously. I think that there was a beginning of taking seriously the budget in the 2016 budget, when the National Assembly and the Executive began to identify that there was padding and so much of that. But when you look back to several years, there was nothing unusual about what took place at the National Assembly. The budget has always been padded. The budget has always been a repeat of the same purchases that were made more than 12 years ago, repeatedly every year. You have the same ministries buying the same number of air conditioners every year, buying the same number of cars every year, buying the same kinds of procurements every year. It was only that this year this government said, okay, we want to do zero budgeting. And this issue came up, and the National Assembly became even much more able to scrutinize the budget, that we now saw what has happened. I think that we need to go back to proper budgeting process. We need to get an Attorney General who outlines for this government a legislative agenda and begins to look at these issues of restructuring this country. We can't constantly be talking about restructuring this country on a daily basis, on a regime by regime basis, when we can get it right once and for all. And I think that President Buhari could leave a legacy for Nigeria if he looks at the way the country is structured, decides that this country should have once and for all this big debate about how this country will be structured. Otherwise, it will be a constant recurring issue. There would always be a constitutional conference demand, a sovereign national conference demand. All of these issues would be there. How do you structure power? How do you give the component parts of the country powers to be able to operate and be able to excel in their own rights? How do you look at the exclusive legislative list and concurrent legislative list and dissipate power to the component parts of the country rather than centralize power at the national level? All these are issues to look at.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Nwankwo. Well, let me come back to you in the studio, Chief Momodu. Mr. Nwankwo had said amendment of the Constitution is not paramount because there were some recommendations from the 7th Assembly that had not been adopted. How possible is it that the government will be restructured without an adequate amendment of the Constitution as it stands?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but even as a layman, I know that it's virtually impossible to do anything about restructuring Nigeria without going back to the National Assembly. All the conferences that we've had, nothing has come of them. You know, they just go in there, everybody talks. If you say you want to restructure now, they will tell you, okay, let's go for another conference. The people who are going to talk are still going to come from within the same community, society, and at the end of the day, they will throw it out. The major thing, and which I took from Mr. Nwankwo, is that the president can do so much, but the president would need the cooperation of the people in the National Assembly. They might not be able to do it instantly, but they can set some time frames and say within the next 4 years, this is what we hope to achieve. So that at least those who are in power now will not say, oh, how can it be our turn? And you are saying in 2 years, we should all get out of the system. But if they set the target and say 2019, by 2019, we have to change the way Nigeria is governed. We have to, you see, because constitutionally, I'm sure the president didn't want a lot of ministers. But constitutionally, he had to pick from the different states. So he cannot just say, I'm collapsing all the ministries. People are going
Things need to be done in order.
So it's still a constitutional thing. And until that happens, we're just wasting our time.
Thank you so much, Chief Dele Mamadou, a former presidential candidate, talking to us there. And also, of course, we've been talking to Mr. Clement Nwankwo, a civil rights activist and a lawyer. Senator Dino Melaye also spoke to us earlier on the program. Many thanks for sharing your thoughts on the program, gentlemen. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Shehu.
Well, and that's our show for today. Many thanks for being a great company on behalf of the team here at Channels Television. Thanks for joining us, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.